A round of applause for my mother, who found a little hobby to fill her time. The room erupted in laughter as I stood there smiling, my heart breaking in silence. She saw a sad, divorced woman playing a part. She had no idea that in 5 minutes, a tycoon in the crowd would hear my name and show everyone the queen I had become. The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering like broken glass. The laughter started politely, then grew into a genuine wave that washed over me, cold and suffocating. My smile felt like a mask of porcelain, threatening to crack. I focused on the crystal chandeliers, the way they fractured the light into 1,000 pieces. Just like my composure, she was the bride. I was the joke. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, some with pity, others with amusement, all of them a weight I was determined to bear with grace. I just breathed. I watched. I remembered every face that was laughing. My hand reached for my wine glass on the table. It trembled. Just once. No one else saw it. But I knew. That single tremor in my hand was a betrayal. I steadied it against the cool, damp glass, forcing my fingers to obey. The laughter died down, replaced by the polite murmur of a party moving on, forgetting the joke as quickly as it was told. But I don't forget. This wasn't a new wound. It was the salt being poured into an old one, a wound my own daughter had been carving for years. The setting changes, but the blade is always the same. I remember a Tuesday afternoon last spring, the air thick with the smell of coffee and rain against the diner window. I had just won the bid for the old library on Meridian Street, a beautiful Beaux-Arts building left to rot for 20 years. I pushed my tablet across the table, my finger tracing the new blueprints, the excitement electric under my skin. Olivia didn't even look up from her phone at first. Then she gave the screen a passing glance. A slow, patronizing smile spread across her face. "Mom, it's a nice thought, really," she'd said, her voice laced with that gentle condescension she had perfected. "But they're just castles in the sky. Castles in the sky." That's what she called my life's work, my second chance. She didn't understand that after the divorce, after her father left me with nothing but a name he had already given to someone else, these buildings were all I had. Phoenix Estates wasn't a game. It wasn't a way to fill my time. I wasn't just restoring brick and mortar. I was restoring myself. Every crumbling facade I saved, every historic window I reglazed, was a piece of my own shattered foundation being put back into place. But she never saw that. She only saw a woman who refused to fit quietly into the box labeled sad divorced mother. Have you ever tried to explain the color of the sky to someone who refuses to look up? The dismissal didn't stop at words. It became a quiet campaign. The emails would arrive every Tuesday morning, like clockwork. "Thinking of you, Mom. Saw this and thought it might be a good fit." The subject line was always painfully cheerful. Inside would be links to job listings: office manager, executive assistant, corporate coordinator for some soulless firm downtown, stable jobs, sensible jobs, small jobs for a small life she had already planned out for me. I never replied. I just deleted them, one by one. My daughter saw a project, not a person. She had forgotten who I was. More painfully, she had forgotten who we were. I remember her as a little girl, no older than 7, her hand lost in mine as we stood across the street from the Harrington Tower. It was abandoned even then, a grand Gothic giant sleeping against the skyline. Her eyes were wide with wonder. "It's a castle for a giant, Mommy," she had whispered. "You'll fix it one day, right?" You can fix anything. The child believed in me. The woman did not. My gaze drifted back across the wedding hall. Olivia was laughing now, her head tilted back as her new husband whispered something in her ear. She was radiant. She was happy. She was completely oblivious to the chasm that had just opened between us. To her, the speech was just a light-hearted joke, a throwaway line. To me, it was a closing statement. She called my dream a castle in the sky. What she didn't know What no one in this room knew was that I had spent the morning not in a hair salon, but in a boardroom with 5 lawyers. I had just signed the biggest deal of my life. The contract was for the Harrington Tower. I now owned her favorite castle. I brought the wine glass to my lips, the cool rim a small, solid anchor in a sea of noise and fake smiles. I let the memory of the Harrington contract settle inside me, a secret warmth, a private victory. It was enough. It had to be. But Olivia wasn't finished with me yet. As I made my way toward the terrace for a breath of cool night air, I felt a sharp tug on my arm. Her fingers, adorned with a brand new wedding band, dug into the lace of my sleeve. Her voice was a frantic whisper, a stark contrast to the joyous bride she was performing as just moments before. "Mom, wait. Before you talk to anyone from his family..." She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes wide with a kind of anxiety I hadn't seen in years. It was a suffocating kind of panic, the kind that comes when you're desperate to control a narrative that has already left the station. "Please," she said, her voice dropping lower, more urgent. "If they ask what you do, just tell them you're retired. Okay? Just for tonight. Retired." The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was a sterile, lifeless word, a word for endings, for golf courses and quiet afternoons. It was everything I had fought against for the last 10 years, every early morning spent poring over blueprints, every late night negotiating with contractors, every dollar I had risked on a crumbling heritage building that everyone else had given up on. She wanted me to take all of that and erase it, to make me small, to make me safe, to fit me back inside the box she was comfortable with. I just stared at her, saying nothing. My silence was my answer, and it made her flustered. "It's just, his family is very traditional, you know? They wouldn't understand this. This whole career pivot thing you're doing. It sounds unstable, ambitious." She said ambitious like it was a disease, and in that moment, under the soft glow of 1,000 fairy lights, I finally understood. It wasn't my failure she was ashamed of. It had never been. It was my success. A retired mother is predictable. A divorced mother with a hobby is a charming story of resilience. But a successful, powerful mother who built an empire from the ashes of a broken marriage? That woman was a threat. That woman didn't need her daughter's approval. She wanted me to be a ghost at her wedding. I pulled my arm free from her grasp, a small, deliberate movement. The warmth of her touch was gone, replaced by a sudden Arctic chill. I looked past her, my gaze sweeping across the laughing, oblivious crowd. And then I saw him. He moved through the room like a shark through water, the guests parting for him without even realizing they were doing it. Alistair Finch, a name that was whispered with equal parts fear and respect in every boardroom in this city. A tycoon, a legend. And he was walking right towards us. The real game was about to begin. I stood my ground as he approached, a man who seemed to carry his own gravitational pull. The low hum of conversation seemed to dip wherever he passed. Olivia, seeing him, straightened her spine, her social smile clicking into a higher, brighter gear. She was a performer, and the most important member of the audience had just arrived. "Mr. Finch, what an honor," she gushed, placing a delicate hand on his arm. "I'm so glad you could make it." "I'd love for you to meet my husband, Daniel." Daniel, to his credit, managed a firm handshake and a steady smile. Finch gave him a brief, assessing nod, the kind one gives to a promising junior associate. His eyes, the color of old money and cold steel, were already scanning the room, looking for a more important conversation. "And," Olivia added, turning to me with a wave of her hand, almost an afterthought, "this is my mother, Catherine." He turned his gaze to me. It wasn't a look, it was an appraisal, quick, dismissive. He saw a well-dressed woman of a certain age, a piece of the wedding scenery, nothing more. He extended a cool, dry hand. The contact was brief, professional, and utterly devoid of interest. A pleasure. he murmured, the words smooth and automatic. Olivia, sensing the conversation was about to die, rushed to fill the silence. Catherine Moreau, she clarified, adding my last name as if it were a final, unimportant detail. Moreau. The name landed in the space between us. It didn't echo. It didn't crash. It simply hung there, suddenly heavy. It was almost imperceptible at first. A flicker behind his eyes, a tiny muscle contracting in his jaw. His polite, predatory smile didn't fall. It froze, becoming a brittle mask of social grace while the gears turned furiously behind it. I watched him, completely still, as his mind raced. It was like watching a computer running a complex search, pulling files from a deep, hidden archive. Moreau, Phoenix Estates, the Harrington bid, C. Moreau. He was connecting the dots. He looked at me again, and this time, it was different. This time, he saw me. The polite disinterest was gone, stripped away in an instant. It was replaced by a sharp, calculating focus, an intense scrutiny that felt more real than anything else that had happened all evening. It was the look of a predator who has just realized the harmless creature in front of him is not prey at all, but a rival apex. He was no longer looking at his employee's mother-in-law. He was looking at the person who had cost him the crown jewel of the city's skyline just that morning. He saw a person, not a prop. Olivia continued to chatter, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shift that had just occurred in the space of 3 silent seconds. She was talking about her honeymoon, about Daniel's promotion, about anything at all to hold the attention of this powerful man. But Alistair Finch was no longer listening to her. His eyes were locked on mine. The polite condescension was gone, replaced by something else entirely. A stunning, undisguised shock. He recovered faster than most would have. Men like Alistair Finch don't get to where they are by showing weakness, not even for a second. His shock was a flash flood, violent, brief, and then gone, the evidence swept away. It was quickly packed down, replaced by a mask of intense, professional curiosity. The casual dismissal was gone. Now I was a puzzle he needed to solve, a variable he hadn't accounted for. Olivia, meanwhile, was a hummingbird of nervous energy, completely oblivious to the silent nuclear reaction that had just occurred between us. She saw his sudden focus on me, not as a sign of respect, but as a social vacuum that she, the perfect hostess, needed to fill. "Mom has always been so creative," she chirped, trying to steer the conversation back to safe, shallow waters. "She has such a wonderful eye for detail. You should see what she did with her little apartment." He wasn't listening to her. His gaze was fixed on me, sharp and unblinking. It was the same look I'd seen across boardroom tables, the look a man gives you right before he tries to dismantle your entire argument, piece by piece. He was testing me. He needed to be sure. He held up a hand, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, not to me, but to my daughter, silencing her mid-sentence. And his voice, when it came, had lost all its patronizing warmth. It was flat, precise, and carried the weight of 1,000 calculated decisions. "So, what is it, exactly, that you do, Mrs. Moreau?" The question was a scalpel. It wasn't small talk. It was a challenge. The silence that followed was a living thing. The cheerful noise of the wedding reception, the clinking of glasses, the distant music, the laughter, all of it faded into a dull, irrelevant roar. In our small triangle, the air was still and charged. Olivia fidgeted, her smile strained. She mistook my silence for shame, for the fumbling embarrassment of a woman with a hobby being put on the spot by a titan. She saw weakness where I was gathering my strength. Have you ever held a truth so powerful that its very presence in a room changes the air pressure? She jumped in, trying to save me from a humiliation only she could perceive. "Oh, Mom's just being modest," she said quickly, her laugh a little too high. She dabbles in historical properties, old houses, that sort of thing. It's a wonderful hobby, really. Keeps her very busy. She was playing checkers while we were playing chess." I let her words hang there for a moment, letting their profound absurdity echo in the space between us. I watched the last traces of doubt leave Alistair Finch's face, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He wasn't looking at me for confirmation anymore. He was looking at Olivia with a flicker of something I could only describe as pity. I finally turned my head slowly and looked directly at Alistair Finch. I ignored my daughter completely. My voice, when I spoke, was not loud. It was not angry. It was the quietest, heaviest thing in the room. "I founded Phoenix Estates." I said nothing more. I didn't need to. The name was enough. Phoenix Estates, the aggressive new player that had come out of nowhere, the firm that specialized in impossible restorations, the one that had been outmaneuvering his own development company for the last 18 months on 3 separate occasions. He didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. Just a single, slow nod. An acknowledgement. The game had been recognized. The players were known. In his world, words were cheap. Results were everything. And he was now standing face to face with the person who had just wrested the Harrington Tower from his grasp. He understood. My victory didn't need a witness, only an opponent. He knew. My daughter did not. And in that moment, the silence between us was more valuable than any words she could have ever said. Alistair Finch's slow nod was a closing gavel on a silent negotiation. The verdict was in. But he wasn't the kind of man to let a revelation of this magnitude remain a private affair. Power, for men like him, is a public performance. He turned from me, his movements economical and deliberate. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply started walking towards the small stage where the DJ was playing a forgettable jazz tune. The crowd parted for him. They always do for men like that. The DJ, a young man who could clearly recognize the scent of money and authority, saw him coming. He instinctively faded the music down, his hand hovering over the console, confused but obedient. A hush began to spread across the room, a ripple of curiosity moving outward from Finch's path. Olivia watched him go, a puzzled frown creasing her perfect bridal makeup. She probably thought he was going to make a toast, a generous impromptu speech to honor her new family. She thought this was still her show. He reached the stage. He took the microphone from its stand. The gentle click as he switched it on was the only sound in a room that had fallen completely, expectantly silent. "Good evening," his voice boomed, low and resonant, carrying an authority that demanded attention. "I hope you'll forgive the interruption. My name is Alistair Finch." A murmur of recognition went through the room. Names were whispered. Reputations were acknowledged. "We are here tonight to celebrate a beautiful union," he continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing briefly on Olivia. "But in celebrating new beginnings, we sometimes overlook the foundations upon which they are built, the quiet strength that makes everything else possible." I stood perfectly still, my wine glass cold in my hand. I knew what he was doing. This wasn't for me. This was for him. He was correcting a cosmic imbalance. He was re-establishing the order of things. Olivia was smiling, a bright, clueless smile, soaking in the praise she thought was directed at her family's status. "Earlier this evening," Finch went on, his voice dropping slightly, drawing the room in closer, "I heard the mother of the bride, Mrs. Catherine Moreau, being celebrated for her little hobby. He used her exact words. The air in the room shifted. It became sharp, electric. This was no longer a toast. It was an execution. "I heard talk of castles in the sky," he said, his eyes now finding mine across the crowded room, a charming metaphor for a woman's ambition, quaint, patronizing, and in this case, profoundly, unequivocally wrong. The silence was now absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I could feel the weight of 200 silent stares turning one by one, away from him and towards me. I watched the color drain from Olivia's face as she finally began to understand that something was terribly, terribly wrong. This wasn't a speech. It was a reckoning. "What some of you may dismiss as a hobby," Finch declared, his voice rising with theatrical precision, "is a company called Phoenix Estates, a firm that has become one of the most formidable and respected players in historical restoration in this country." Gasps, whispers. A man at a nearby table choked on his champagne. I saw heads turning, people frantically trying to place my face to reconcile the sad, divorced mother with the name of a company that had been making headlines, and her castles in the sky? Finch let a small, sharp smile touch his lips. "Well, this morning, Catherine Moreau closed a deal that many, including myself, thought was impossible. She is now the sole owner of the Harrington Tower, her castle, the one she had forgotten." The name dropped into the room like a bomb. Harrington Tower was a legend, a landmark. Its acquisition was the biggest real estate story of the year, and the architect of that deal was standing right here in a green lace dress, being mocked by her own child. I finally looked at Olivia. Her illusion had shattered. Her carefully constructed world of status and perception had been blown apart by a single, undeniable truth. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that was almost painful to watch. She looked at me, her expression a chaotic mix of disbelief, shame, and a desperate, silent question. Her world had been turned upside down, and I had said nothing at all. All eyes were on me. The weight was immense, but for the first time all night it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a crown. Alistair Finch placed the microphone back on its stand with a decisive click. The sound echoed in the stunned silence of the room. He gave me one last brief nod, a sign of respect between equals, and then seamlessly melted back into the crowd, his purpose served. The spell was broken. The room erupted not into applause, but into a chaotic symphony of frantic whispers, sidelong glances, and the low hum of reputations being reassessed in real time. The air was thick with it. I saw people who had offered me pitying smiles just an hour before now avoiding my gaze, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and fear. I didn't linger to watch the fallout. I didn't need to. I placed my untouched wine glass on the table. I turned. I walked. My footsteps were the only steady rhythm in a room spinning out of control. I moved past the shocked faces, past the whispered apologies that were already beginning to form on people's lips. They weren't for me. They were for themselves. As I reached the grand exit, a hand touched my arm again. It was Olivia. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and swimming with a confusion so profound it looked like pain. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. I don't understand." And that was the tragedy of it all. She truly didn't. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was horrified that her perception of the world had been so wrong. Her shame wasn't for hurting me. It was for being publicly, spectacularly incorrect. I looked at my daughter, the bride in her perfect white dress, standing amidst the ruins of a story she thought she controlled. "I know," I said, and I gently removed her hand from my arm. I walked out into the cool, quiet night, leaving the noise and the broken pieces of her perfect party behind me. The heavy oak doors closing at my back felt less like an exit and more like an emancipation. The phone calls started the next day after they left for their honeymoon. At first, they were frantic, breathless voicemails left from an airport lounge in Rome. Then came the emails, long, rambling paragraphs filled with questions, justifications, and a desperate attempt to understand a mother she had never really known. Her apology, when it finally came weeks later, wasn't for me. It was for herself. I listened to her voice on the phone, thin and strained over thousands of miles of ocean. I heard her cry. I heard her say she was sorry, but I also heard what she wasn't saying. She wasn't sorry for believing I was small. She was sorry for being proven wrong in front of the world. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I just listened. When she was finished, a long silence stretched between us, filled only with the static of an international call. "I have to go, Olivia," I said quietly, and I hung up. Some relationships are not meant to be restored. They are meant to be outgrown. 6 months passed like a season changing. The winter of my old life gave way to a spring of my own making. Phoenix Estates soared. We acquired 2 more historical properties, one in Chicago, one in Boston. The press started calling me the matriarch of masonry, a title I found both amusing and fitting. Tonight, I am not at a wedding. I am home. I am standing on the rooftop terrace of the Harrington Tower. The restoration is almost complete. Below me, the city sprawls out like a blanket of scattered diamonds, a universe of a million tiny lights, each one a life, a story. The wind up here is clean and cold. It whips a loose strand of silver hair across my face, and I don't bother to brush it away. This is not a castle in the sky. It is concrete and steel and glass. It is the result of sleepless nights and iron-willed negotiations. It is proof. The phone in my pocket buzzes. It's Olivia. It's always Olivia. I don't look at it. I don't need to. Her apologies have changed over the months. They sound more genuine now, tinged with a real, painful regret. But it no longer matters. This was not about forgiveness. This was about freedom. Freedom from her expectations. Freedom from the world's dismissive labels. Freedom from the quiet, persistent voice that once whispered I was too old, too broken, too much of a woman to build something that would last. I looked down at the city lights, the magnificent glittering crown at my feet, a crown I had built for myself, stone by stone. You don't need permission to build your own empire. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me and listening to my story. If these are the kinds of stories that matter to you, please subscribe to hear more, and I would be truly honored to read about your own family experiences in the comments below.